Garda Show, 8 to 10 a.m. And you're listening to...
Right, so as always, we have the team from 27-4 giving us an update on the markets. My guest today is Orin Tambo, who's the head of investment strategy at 27-4. Orin, appreciate your time once again. Good morning.
Good morning, Ashraf. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Right, you got a few things to say. Let's start with the USA, right?
Yeah, so I thought maybe, I was looking around for news to look at, and I thought maybe for a change, let's look at something which appears to be good. So we received the CPI report, which is basically the report on prices, consumer prices in the US. And that was for the month of March. And I thought optically there were good aspects to it. So what they refer to as the headline inflation, which is basically, the number that we often talk about, that one came down from around 6% to 5%, which is quite, a very meaningful decline in the prices for consumer goods in the US. But also I think what was quite good as well, is the fact that we often look at, so when you calculate that inflation, the one that I've quoted, which is 5%, they'll be comparing the index in the month of February the month of March versus the month of March in the previous year. But when you compare, the CPI index between February and March, we also saw that, it appears to be cooling down as well, because it went up by 0.1%. That was good news, the good aspect of it. But at the same time, there is what they refer to as the core inflation, which removes, the cyclical components like your energy, like your food. So that one went up to 5.6%. From 5.5% in the previous month. So I think that was probably the main concern. And I was looking at how markets reacted, because the number usually comes out at around 9 o'clock in the morning in the US, and then we've got markets opening, and the markets were not very welcome to the number. I think they were looking at the core inflation number, which is being driven by rentals, particularly in the US. But I think overall, the direction in which inflation is going is quite good. It appears that from the US, that the Fed is to some extent winning in this battle against inflation. We expect that to probably translate into our own inflation as well.
So this at the same time where South Africa's inflation rate has gone up, and certainly interest rates have gone up. How does what happens in the USA impact on someone like me?
Yeah, so I think it's very important, because if you look at the way the central bank has been taking its decision, because quite often when the central bank is taking its decision, it also looks at the at the exchange rate. And what I've seen over the past year basically is because is the fact that we've seen that the rand weakening quite a lot. There's quite a lot of local factors, but part of it is because the Fed has been hiking interest rates. So when the Fed hikes interest rates, we see money across the world flock into the US, which tends to cause the dollar to be stronger than most of the international currencies. So what's happening here is, with the inflation coming down very quickly in the US, we expect that the Fed would probably start considering either pausing the interest rates, or even cutting at some point, probably in 2024. And when that happens, it tends to provide tailwinds for us. So I'm thinking here in terms of the rand, that could be quite positive for our own currency.
Okay. But
we can also read a couple of things from that number. We're starting to see energy prices coming down, and expect that to also, it hasn't been translating for us, but we expect that to also come through, particularly when it comes to food prices.
Okay, let's talk about mining.
Yes, so I think that is not, a very good macroeconomic data. The mining, it's actually the manufacturing production that came out, because the mining production is coming out today. And what we have seen over probably the past 5 years is a very gradual decline in manufacturing production, and some have called it deindustrialization of the country, which is, I think, a very correct characterization of what's happening in South Africa. It's not a good thing. So what we saw during the month of February is that we saw the manufacturing production, essentially coming down the number was 5.2%. So it was lower compared to the February in the previous year by 5.2%, and that was after probably 4 or 5 months of consecutive declines. In January, it was down 4.1%. In December, it was down 4.6% compared to the December of the previous year. So it's not a good story that's coming out, and now we're trying to translate that into what does it mean for GDP. Remember, this is happening in the first quarter of this year, so we expect to see mining and manufacturing weighing on the GDP number that is going to come out for the first quarter, bearing in mind that we had a negative GDP growth in the fourth quarter. So if we have another negative number on the GDP growth during the first quarter, it means that we're going to have a technical recession, and I mean it's not good for for consumers.
All right, and the last thing I'm just thinking, looking at your notes here, so if the bottom line to this one, if you have a letter to send, don't send it via the post office. You may not get to the destination on time. Tell me about goings on at the SA post office.
Yeah, so I think I think it's very sad news. Essentially, the post office has been put under liquidation, which means that it's struggling to pay its creditors, and it has not been able to meet its obligations, in terms of some of the services that it has acquired, and therefore it was forced to go under liquidation. I think it's quite sad. I mean, so I was just trying to look this morning, if it happens that the post office is closed, which is usually something that could happen when you go under liquidation, depending on whether you can be rehabilitated. We'll probably be the second country, I think, together with the likes of probably Venezuela, which doesn't have a postal service. And I think it's even worse because when you look at the role that the post office has been playing in our economy, it has been providing banking services to very remote communities. It has been providing internet services in areas where you would find very few private players taking a role. So we're just hoping that the government would intervene. It's a state-owned entity, and we haven't heard anything from the government, but we're just hoping that the government will intervene and try to probably provide a bailout and find a way out for the post.
Maybe there's another example of another state-owned enterprise that somehow we have just got horribly wrong. Okay, and all the implications thereof. Thanks for your time, Orin. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ashraf.
Okay. There we are. Lots to reflect on, certainly the post office and what that really means, and who will pick up the pieces, because there's a space, a vacuum. Do they get rehabilitated? Do they get reformed with a completely new business model? Or do they just shut down? They don't exist. And then who takes up the pieces, like a private post office? Or do their services get integrated, need I say it, with the banks or someone like that? Somebody's been listening to you and I. It's like, hold it, there's an opportunity here. A space has opened up. Can I jump into that space? Well, we'll chat to Tambisa Fakude coming up in a moment in that wonderful feature called My First Ramadan.